Leadership is a key ingredient for economic growth, and fortunately, the continent is replete with leaders, both young and old, who hope to bring development and transformation. An understanding of the framework behind leadership is highly crucial in achieving the aforementioned development and transformation. While the right leadership ensures that many doors of opportunities are open, the wrong leadership, on the other hand, ensures that such doors remain permanently shut. Africa needs the wisdom that modern stakeholders bring to the table from years of experience, as well as the intuition from young geniuses. What will happen if we combine these two? You are welcome to the African Leadership Conversation, where we bring you relevant information about leadership on the continent. Our core mandate here is to bring you the answers to the hows, the whys, the whats, and the whens of leadership in Africa. Today I'm flanked by two young gentlemen, or should I rather say two young leaders. One admires Patrick Ewua for his boldness in wanting to redefine education in Africa, and the other also loves John C. Maxwell and wants to be a John C. Maxwell certified coach. I have here Richmond and then Sylvester. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Diana.
Yeah, okay. So Richmond is the co-founder for Ghana Readers Association. He's the co-founder and lead.
I'm
Very
the founder
important.
and lead.
Okay. The founder and lead
Yes,
for Ghana Readers Association. And he's also a fellow with the education sector here at the Grace Life Leadership Center. And then there's also Sylvester, who is a consultant on Africa-China business affairs and the president for education sector here at the Grace Life Leadership Center. I'm going to start with you, Sly. Tell us the current state of leadership in Africa. Just give us an overview of leadership looking at the past 20 years.
Yeah, first of all, I'm really excited to be here and to be with both of you. And for this particular podcast show, I think it's a very brilliant idea to have young people talk about leadership, right? Having said that, I feel like you are telling me to give a state of the leadership address in Africa, like we have it in Ghana, State of the Nation address, right? Yeah, but let's come back. What is the state of leadership in Africa, right? And for me, we are talking about political leadership because it is increasingly becoming true that it is political leadership that drives economies across the globe. Of course, others also say that economic leadership counts, but I'm sure we are talking about political leadership here, right? So an assessment of the political leadership landscape in Africa over the past 20 years. And luckily enough, I'm more than 20, so I should be able to say what it is. Of course, 20 years ago, I was little and all of that. But let's come back to the main issue here. I think political leadership in Africa hasn't met the expectations of the people. Because I believe that, first of all, leadership should be able to meet the expectations of the people. What are the expectations of the people across Africa? People are looking for access to quality education. People are looking to have cheap ways of accessing food and water, quality health care, and all of that. But what we see is still the prevalence of some of these issues that I just spoke about. So I think that leadership, and to be specific, political leadership for the past 20 years in Africa hasn't met the expectations of the people. I think that would be my assessment, genuine assessment.
And Richmond?
Hey, Diana. Thank you very much. And today, Diana, you've placed me at the tightest spot in my life.
Say that again.
Sharing this forum with my mentor and leadership coach. Oh, come on. This is not fair, but I'll try as much as possible to not say things that are bigger than me. So I'll toe the line of my mentor.
I'm
Yes,
still
yes.
learning from you though, so
You
They
see?
said if you learn how to wash your hands very well, you're able to eat with kings. So I
Eh,
guess you've learned how to wash your hands. So
I'm
you
still
better
watching.
enjoy the food.
I'm still
he's
watching.
actually just exaggerating. He's full of a lot of good stuff. Take it away.
Sylvester. All right. Thanks for this topic. All right. I think it's time that Ghana and Africa sit down and assess our leadership problems, our leadership structure, and whatever our affairs with leadership is. With your question, I will tackle the first phase and go straight to the second, the state of leadership in Africa. And later I'll give an overview of the past 20 years, hopefully. The state of leadership in Africa currently, as Sly was saying, that it hasn't met the expectations of the people. I think yes, it hasn't met the expectations of the people, but over the years, the people has been quiet for a while. Now I call it a leadership awakening. People are demanding a lot of from leaders because they've now learned how to make these leaders accountable to their actions and whatever they are doing. We see this in various forms, from strikes, from demonstrations. Currently, Ghana, we have the Occupy. I don't want to use that word. So, Occupy the Jubilee House protest. We have lots of Fix the Country demonstrations going on. We are seeing strikes from UTAG and those other associations. Realize that the grievances of the people are becoming increasing.
Yeah.
They are becoming more and more. And we are not seeing it in the form of just demonstrations and protests. We can see lots of coups in Africa, if not in Ghana. We are seeing a lot of coup d'etats.
Yeah.
And I believe unequivocally that these coups are a result of bad leadership. And this is what Chinua Achebe pointed out 4 decades ago, that the problem with Nigeria, in our case, Ghana and Africa, is that of leadership. We've come to our senses that leadership is the problem we are facing. All these coups that are happening in Africa, that are happening in lots of countries in West Africa and beyond, is a problem of leadership. I have a couple of statistics here, and I'll hit on it real quick while trying to answer an overview of leadership, the situation of leadership in Africa. From 1950 to 2022, surprisingly, right after our post-colonial era, we've had 215 coup attempts in Africa. 215.
That's huge.
And
Just
that is
across.
interesting. Where did you get this statistic from?
This from Voice of America News,
Okay.
and it's amazing because these 215 coup attempts are across just 45 countries in Africa. Just do the math and you know how you're going to assign the number of coups to the number of countries.
Yeah.
Out of these 215, 106 or 107, just recent Gabon one, has been 107 successful coups in Africa. 107. And that's something we should sit down and ponder about. Maybe from 1915 is a bit quite far-fetched. I'll move straight to maybe 2010. Let's analyze from 2010 to probably 2023 the number of coups that happen in Africa, and realize that the number is still high. There's been 54 coup attempts in Africa. There are 54 African states, and there is 54 coup attempts. But these 54 coup attempts is not from 54
Of
countries,
course, recurrence in
but
other
rather
countries.
29 countries.
Yeah.
29 countries, 54 coup attempts, just from 2010 to 2023. That's 13 years gap. And these 54 coup attempts, 14 of them has been successful. Adding Gabon's own will be 15. 15 of them has been successful. And looking at the rate of coup attempts and their success, unequivocally, we can say leadership is the problem. And now, everybody, every person in Africa and Ghana beyond is realizing that leadership is the problem. We are agreeing with John C. Maxwell when he said everything rises and falls on leadership. And our problems and our success, we are going to attribute it to leadership. This is the awakening.
And just to buttress what he said about leadership being the problem, I think Sam Adeyemi, who wrote a very profound article on World Economic Forum, also said that Africa, in that particular article, he said, Africa doesn't need charity, it needs good leaders. So I think, all in all, the problem has always and will always be about leadership. Yeah, I agree.
Amazing. It's like you mentioned something about expectation of the people when it comes to leadership. And then Richmond, you also said there has been recent happenings. Look at the protests in Ghana, look at various schools, the statistics you gave us and all that. We do realize that there's this gap in leadership.
Yeah, right.
And then it has several ripple effects.
Yeah.
So how do we assess this gap? What can be done? This rippling effect, does it go just beyond the protest or the coup? What is the way forward?
Way forward. But let me look at the gaps in leadership, right? I think that is what we are talking about.
Yeah.
So I will look at it from two perspectives, right? Two angles. Gap in leadership in Africa. I think there are two things to look at here. Again, a gap in the expectations of leadership and a gap in how leaders are raised in Africa, right? So for the first one, like I said earlier, the expectations of the people, voting these people into political offices is so that at the end of the day, they will have they can eat to their fill, right? They'll be satisfied,
Solve their problems.
Yes, solve their problems.
Yeah.
And if when they are sick, they can easily access medical health care at cheaper rates and all of that. But that hasn't been met, right? So that is a gap for me, a gap in the expectations of leadership. We are seeing it all across. And Richmond alluded that it's the reason for the numerous coups that we are seeing across Africa, right? So that is the first gap I'm seeing. The second is how these leaders come into office. In fact, their background. Do they have the leadership qualities expected of a leader, right? At the Grace Life Leadership Center, we say leaders are supposed to be selfless. These political leaders that are in the various political offices in Africa, how were they raised? Were they intentionally raised to occupy leadership positions in Africa? What is their orientation, right? Which schools did they go to? What is their skill set? What is their heart set, actually? What's their mindset, right? How are these leaders raised? Very, very important to the type of leaders we would have in the political landscape. So for me, these are the two gaps. One is that the people expectations have been dashed, right? And the second is that we don't have a good model that helps to raise leaders that are needed to solve the problems of Africa right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Richmond.
I'll top up with what he just said, and I would define the leadership gap as a significant disparity or shortage of the effectiveness or the quality or the ethical standards a leader should possess. And in Africa, we can see this. We lack accountable leaders, selfless leaders. We have leaders who haven't obtained the kind of training a leader should have, the kind of leadership training a leader should possess. And this has resulted in this gap in leadership. I will touch on the ripple effects quickly, and I'll continue from where he ended. Ripple effects of the gap of leadership in Africa. We can see it in various folds from numerous countries, but I'll just highlight current situations in Africa. The Gabon coup and the recent Niger coup. You could see that there is a problem. This leadership gap has brought about a lot of effects. They lack social health care, education, their livelihood is suffering. Economic underdevelopment, there is a lot of mismanagement of economic resources. The economy is struggling. These are the kind of ripple effects this leadership gap can have on us. And it's very easy to say this, but I like it when Simon Sinek said that leadership is not about the next election, but it's about the next generation. If you want our future leaders to do better than our current leaders, we should start training them now. And that's what slide ended with. We should start training our leaders. We should start educating them. The people that we expect to be our future leaders, we should start training them now.
Yeah.
And that's something beautiful the Grace Life Leadership Center is doing, raising the next generation of leaders. Because it's very easy to say, it's like Ghana, every youth knows that he's the future leader or we are the future leaders. But what are we doing to ensure that these people really grow up to become the future leaders? If we don't do that, and I say this, if we don't do that, our future leaders are going to do worse off than what we are facing. As you can see, surprisingly and shockingly, it's like the more we go forward, the bad or worse our leadership becomes. Comparing the kind of leadership we had during our independence, the likes of Kwame Nkrumah and co, and now the current leaders we are having, not talking about Ghana as a context, but the whole Africa, we are seeing that it's been a decline. And for what our future leaders to be better, we should raise them down.
Very interesting states.
Yeah.
So I recently saw a TikTok video, and then a gentleman asked a lady, a white lady to be precise, he asked her that she should name one city in Africa. Guess what? She was fumbling, and then later she said, "Oh, these people are struggling with access to water. What is the essence of knowing their city or capital city?" And it got me thinking,
Right.
is there a little bit of truth in what she said? Are some countries in Africa struggling with certain basic amenities like water, like electricity, and the likes? You could see across the over 54 countries that in terms of economic growth, in terms of how amenities are even distributed, it's not the same. There are lots of variances.
Right.
There are lots of differences. So what are some of the things that are accounting for this variation in leadership across the African continent?
Okay. I guess I would have to take this. Yeah, so a really interesting question, right? And I'm sure we are talking about us comparing leadership across African countries.
Exactly.
For me, this question can be put in another way, right? What are the effects and impacts of leadership across African countries? I think that is how we want to look at it, because we've already established that leadership is supposed to be a means to an end. In other words, leadership is supposed to help make the lives of the people better. It's supposed to be about the people, right?
Yeah.
So, that is something that we need to pay attention to, right? What has been the impact, the influence, the effects of political leadership across Africa? Like you mentioned earlier. And maybe before I come to that, right, I think there have been a lot of statistics around economic growth measured by GDP. I think we have GNP.
Yeah.
I think we have happiness index and all of those kind of indexes across, right? But for me, honestly, that doesn't really reflect happiness on the ground. I have my own, thoughts about some of this measurement of developments across Africa. Having said that, I think we can all see for sure that leadership indeed is not delivering the type of effect that we all desire in Africa. But it's not all that gloomy, right? Some African countries are doing better than the others. And I think you asked the question, why? Maybe before I even answer the question why, I did a research, right? For my master's degree program, I decided to do a comparative analysis of Ethiopia and Ghana's economic growth for 10 years. I mean, given hindsight, I wouldn't have done these two countries because their population is different and other factors. I should have compared apples to apples. That is something that I looked at. But having said that, I think these are still African countries, right? Yeah. And I was just trying to look at their economic growth trajectories, I mean, in the last 10 years. And I realized that in terms of GDP, they measure it's 7% or 8%. Ethiopia was growing quite faster. That was somewhere around 2014, 15, thereabout. Ethiopia was doing much better. But when you compare the quality of life of the people in terms of the per capita income, right? Ghana was doing well, but in terms of growth, the rate of growth, they were doing better. And it is simply because of population, right? Because if you divide the total resources of the people, for the entire people, you will definitely see those kind of discrepancies. But even more importantly, the reason for the discrepancies in the growth trajectories or development trajectories of African countries, for me, is the realization of the various political leaders across these African countries. Why would we see one African country doing better than the other? For me, it's leadership again. And even, getting granular about it, I think it's about the reawakening, the realization of the various leaders. A lot of people are talking about Paul Kagame of Rwanda. And other African countries, out there. Why is Paul Kagame probably doing better than, I don't want to use certain, but why is he doing better than other African presidents across? I believe that President Kagame probably might have sat down and realized that we need to take a different approach to this whole political governance system. We need to focus on the people. We need to make sure that the initiatives, the policies, the programs, and all government attempts should be geared towards making the lives of the people better, right? And so I think it's basically because different African countries are having, different thoughts and a reawakening, just like some people are forcefully trying to take power to try and make things better. It's the same way certain African leaders are also having a silent reorientation of how leadership should be implemented in Africa. So for me, the differences can be seen in the fact that different African presidents or leaders are having a different perspective of what or how leadership should be implemented in Africa.
Okay, before I come to you, Richmond, just like a quick one on that.
Yes.
So with the Rwanda story,
right,
he has been in power for a number of years, since the 2000s. And maybe the argument might be that for some of the countries, they just have 2 shots, so 2 terms, just 8 years, and might complain about not having sufficient time to be able to implement, as compared to like other leaders who've been in power for a number of years. What's your comments on that?
Really interesting question, follow-up question, So back to my research discussion, the comparative analysis between Ghana and Ethiopia, one of the variances, one of the factors that resulted, that I personally, saw resulted in the differences in especially the economic growth rate and some of the policies, is the continuity of policy implementation. They have that luxury of implementing their policies across many years. In fact, they have policies that they run for three years consecutive. Like they run 3 years and then they begin again, and then all of that. That is actually what China does. So they have that luxury because the Ethiopian government, I think the TFP also, I need to cross-check that, but they've been in power for a very long time. The same with Paul Kagame. So that particular hypothesis actually works that the continuity of governments to a large extent can also determine their impacts in government, right? But for me, that is not it, honestly, because I think what is needed is a consensus among African leaders.
Exactly.
So that irrespective of whether you have 10 years or 20 years, the consensus is that when I come to power, the people must be the focus. Making the lives of the people better must be the focus. It's non-negotiable, right? Irrespective of the number of years I have in power, right? So that should be the big deal and not the number of years. Otherwise, somebody might argue that how about if you have a bad leader, who has a long time in office, what happens to that, right? So I think for me, there must just be a consensus across African leaders that irrespective of whether I have 3 years or I have 4 years, when I come to power, the people must be the focus. I think for me that is...
And also continuity of a particular roadmap. If there's an existing roadmap.
So if there's that consensus where Richmond will come to power and for him it is about the people, he will see a need to continue whatever policy I've started, because I didn't start that policy for political gain, but for the people, right?
Very, very, very essential.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for you.
Oh, I can see.
Yeah.
You have it now. You have the floor.
Sylvester is my mentor for a reason, because he concluded with something I wanted to start with.
Stop exaggerating.
I'm serious.
No, you have to say your
I'm
own.
serious. And I like your follow-up question to him, because that's where I would be coming from. It's very easy for us to be categorizing leadership in Africa. Before I continue, leadership in Africa is diverse as the continent itself. All right, so there are diverse leadership in Africa. We can categorize them as, this is authoritarian, like Paul Kagame. We can have democracy.
No,
like
did
Ghana.
you say authoritarian? That is your view.
My view, okay.
Okay.
we can have democracy. We even have tribal and traditional form of leadership in Africa. So it's very easy to categorize them that this is staying longer in office. This has absolute power. This has power from the people or whatever. In my view, and starting from where he ended, there are only two categories of leadership: good leadership or bad leadership. In the sense that if you have 20 years in power, just give us the good leadership we want.
Yeah.
If you have 2 years, just give it to us. So yes, the impacts, measuring impacts, we can talk about their continuity in office, as you said. But when you have 4 years, like Nelson Mandela had, he had 4 years and still showed the good leadership style he's supposed to. Paul Kagame has been in power since 1994. He has freed his country, Rwanda, from the genocide they were suffering from, and they are making tremendous progress. Ghana, we are also in democracy, and we can see what we are suffering from. So it's very easy to say, we need democracy, we need this kind of style in our leadership journey. It's very easy. But what we need the most is that whatever the leadership style we want to implement, it should be good. That's the only comparison of leadership in Africa. It's either we have good leadership and they are doing well, or we have bad leadership and they are doing bad. From your actions, we will know which kind of leader you are. And that's what Africa is facing.
And let me help summarize what he said again, right? So Deng Xiaoping is one of the leaders of China. He actually led them to what is called economic diversification, trying to open China up, the opening up of China to the outside world. He actually led that reform, And he made a very profound statement in one of his speeches that it doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white. The most important thing is that this particular cat is able to catch a mice.
Okay.
When you put it down and there's a mice, it should be able to catch it. So once it does that, this particular cat is a good cat.
Yes.
It doesn't matter the color of the cat. So I think that is what Richmond just said, that it doesn't matter whether you have 20 years or whether you are from party A or party B. What we need is the exhibition of good leadership that can transform the lives of the people. Right, catch that mind for the minds of good, of making our lives better, so that inflation wouldn't be driven by food. That is something that is very critical to the people. They should be able to eat to do their fill. They shouldn't go hungry. And it's all boils down to leadership. You can trace it to leadership. Right.
Wow.
I'm sure a lot of our audiences will be wondering, okay, there's been so much talk on leadership awakening, the current state of leadership in Africa, a whole lot about what is happening on the continent when it comes to leadership. Now they would want to know, what kind of leadership models would lead to effective leadership, or the kind of results they want to see, the expectation of the people? What kind of leadership models would you recommend? I'll start with you, Richmond.
Okay. That's nice. Okay, so what kind of leadership and
models?
Before I even say something, our audience has a lot of leadership styles in their head. They can mention a lot of styles of leadership, and they are all very right. But I like this LinkedIn post from Simon Sinek. He's one of the people I learned from too, apart from John Sima. So he said leadership is not about being in charge, but about taking care of those in your charge. Leadership is not about being in charge, but taking care of those in your charge. And historically, Africa has really suffered from selfish leaders who don't think about us.
Yep.
So the best style of leadership, the best leadership model that should be implemented in Africa is the leadership model GLC preaches and teaches. Is the selfless kind of leadership, is the servant leadership. And in this leadership style, we can have all the great qualities other leadership models possess. We have collaboration. It encourages integrity. Every good form of attributes that every leadership should possess. It starts from servant leadership, taking care of those in your charge, as Simon Sinek says. So that's the leadership model that I think Africa, Ghana specifically, should embrace. Every leader should be here to serve, and that's your job.
Richmond, you've proven that you've truly imbibed the Grace Life leadership models. Yes, like
Yeah, and
what
I'm
would you
proud
say?
of that. I can see, I mean, that he's really, internalized some of the things, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think he looked at it from the leadership style point of view. I want to look at it from the models that can help change the narrative, right?
Yes.
What type of leadership development models do we need to change the narrative, to get better leaders in offices, public offices, political leaders, right? And that is what I want to look at. So I mentioned earlier that the gap in leadership, one of the gaps in leadership is how leaders are raised, right? So here I'm going to, kind of give some perspective on how leaders should be raised, right?
Okay.
One of the models I think should be a youth-focused or centered kind of approach or model to changing the narrative. Africa is, has a youthful population. I think 70%, of the continent
And expected to even grow.
to grow, right? Billions of young Africans. So, and I agree with Samson Adeyemi again, who in that article said that the burgeoning, youthful population of Africa is actually an opportunity to change the narrative, to engineer and raise a new generation of leaders. So whatever model, or the model I'm proposing, is that we should focus on the young people of Africa. Somebody said that as for the old ones, they've already been corrupted. So you can't do anything about it. But it's not entirely true. I think we have some old folks who are doing some good job. But I believe that the young population of Africa indeed presents a marvelous and unique opportunity for all of us, right, to raise a new generation of leaders. And I think that is what the Grace Life Leadership Center is doing. Doing great job by focusing on raising young Africans who can change the narrative, right? So that is kind of one of the models. And we need a leadership model that is democratic, right? And I don't mean democracy. We need to democratize leadership development in Africa, because I think over the years, when we say leadership development, it's been the elites kind of leadership development. It is those who can afford to go to the Harvard Business Schools and all those top leadership institutions, right, to pay and be raised as a leader, to be taught the things that leaders need to know. But essentially, I believe that we need models that will raise leaders for free. Well, Sam Adeyemi also says that we actually need change agents that will leverage both for-profit and non-profit. But I think to be able to accelerate the rate, accelerate getting good leaders for Africa, we need to make it free, right? We need a lot of non-profits who will actually help raise leaders. So two models: democratizing leadership development and focusing on young Africans to create a new generation of leaders. For me, if we're able to do these two things, then I believe that we could possibly get the type of leaders that we so desire in Africa.
But you spoke about free. I believe there are existing NGOs or non-profits that are pushing this agenda and even doing it for free. But are we able to get the interest of the people? Then it brings me back to the question, who is responsible for implementing these models?
Right. So I think, first of all, we are all responsible. We are all supposed to help change the narrative in different ways. And before I come to my ideal who is responsible, I think I want to say that indeed everyone is responsible, from parents to teachers to pastors to imams to everyone, because since we are targeting young people and young people are everywhere on the continent, then everyone has a responsibility, so that the pastor has a responsibility to make sure that ethical leaders are raised. Young people in the church are taught how to be servants, because Jesus was a servant, right? Jesus said, servant first, the one among you who should actually be healed is the servant, right? So pastors are involved. Teachers, kindergarten teachers are supposed to help us, meet or, achieve this particular aim of getting better leaders. Lecturers and everyone, as a firstborn, you have a responsibility to make sure that you teach the younger ones how to be selfless, because we are talking about servant leadership. But having said that, and this is kind of a more flexible and relaxed way of changing the narrative. Having said that, I think we need a coordinated approach by passionate people. And I love what the leadership of the Grace Life leadership is doing. These are the type of models we need. We need people to come together and say that, look, we need to take steps to change this particular bad leadership, bad governance in Africa, right? So I think even more essentially, we need groups who come together as non-profits or for-profit to help us raise different generation of leaders for the continent.
Richmond.
It's amazing, and I would rather pick it from his previous delivery when he was talking about change agents.
You seem to be in the habit of picking up from where he
I
left.
actually learned from him. I told you. I like learning from him. Okay.
Next time there'll be nothing to pick up from.
All my wisdom nuggets are from him. I just pick it up. Okay. He was talking about change agents, and I think it's one amazing perspective. That wasn't what I would have said though, but I want to use the change agents approach since it's collide with my opinion. It's very easy for all of us to be looking for these people outside ourselves, talking about governments and the people in power. While we do that, is the same thing we'll be doing about when he's saying we have the elite in power. We have to actually democratize these things. Okay. So rather than looking up to them, look within yourself. Okay. And this is where my point of change is come in. We should all try as much as possible to be the change we wish to see. Let's embody this change. Let's express these leadership models. Servant leadership. Put yourself there for that. Sacrifice your life for that. Live your life as a servant leader. And it's going to benefit us as a whole. If you are being a servant leader and I'm being a servant leader, that network, that connection we all build is going to benefit Ghana and Africa as a whole. I always say this and I repeat. It's very easy for all of us to be looking around, looking for the avatar, while the arrows lies on our head. We will never see it because we are looking around for the avatar. We all get to be avatar of ourselves. We all get to be leaders of ourselves. So yes, it starts from self-leadership, then we can extend it to others. When he was talking about group of people coming together to be the change agents, it starts from an individual wanting to do that, another individual wanting to do that, another individual. So we all want to do this. We all want to push Ghana forward. We all want to push Africa forward. And when we come together, we become the change agents we want to be.
Yeah, so, I agree. Yeah.
So, gentlemen, your final words, Richmond, as we wrap up the discussion.
My final words. We're talking about change agents right now, and I know my viewers are here, our viewers, our audience, they are watching us. And it's very easy to be wanting to implement these things we are talking about. It's very easy to write it down, make a personal resolution to become a leader of yourself, to become a servant leader. But it starts from now. As you are watching this video, as you are listening to us, share it to others. Let people know about leadership. Let people understand leadership through our forums, through our communication, through our discussions. You'll be able to educate others. You'll be able to make others aware of leadership. And that's where it starts. You hear it, you share it to others, and we all become aware, we all become awakened to become better leaders.
Yeah. I agree. And I'm tempted to say that I don't have any words, but yeah, I think it's really
I wouldn't
been
believe that.
yeah, it's really been a nice conversation, you know,
really
listening
enjoyed
to your perspectives. And I hope that
And learning
our
from you.
audience have also enjoyed this conversation. But for me, you know, more importantly and more seriously, this leadership thing we are talking about is more serious than others see it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So a few days ago, I was just having my own thoughts, and I'm like, people are really taking leadership for granted, especially political leadership. And like I made clear earlier, you know, in my earlier submission, that it is political leadership that is driving economies across the world, right? In the modern state that we see. So that if we don't get the political leadership right, so many things will go wrong.
Yeah.
It is that serious. In other words, I can tell you that if we don't pay attention to raising different generation of political leaders, inflation will continue to be driven by food. And that is sad for me, actually. And somebody will be thinking, how can you correlate my wache or my kenke to leadership? There is a direct correlation, right? Your kenke is now 5 cities because someone who is supposed to lead you to make sure that that kenke is 1 city is not doing their job. It's as simple as ABCD. It's not rocket science, right? So it is time we all took this whole leadership reorientation, reawakening, and calling for change agent thing serious. I have some people, young people, who think that you guys are being too grandiose. You are talking too much. You are talking about bigger things. We want food, but they've forgotten that the things we are talking about will determine the food they are talking about. So I would like to say that let's have more of such conversations. I'm looking forward to more of this.
Certainly.
Let's talk about this. Let's shape the conversation around leadership, right? Let's make sure that this story goes very far. This narrative goes very far. We need selfless, change-driven, principled, servant leaders. Apart from this, nothing can change the situation or change the narrative. So I hope that those who look at, who watch this video will share it to their friends, and let's shape the narrative together. I
can promise you this will not be the last of it.
Very
we are
good.
going to certainly be talking and having more discussion around leadership on the continent.
Yeah.
And then, yes, I also look forward to hosting the two of you again.
Can't wait.
It has
let's
been
see.
a very interesting
I hope next time there will be sobolo or some gobe by the side,
like
so that while we are talking, we are eating at the same time.
Yeah, the good thing is that my production manager is listening, so I think you get
Very
that
good.
done.
We pray so.
Let's see leadership, taking effect right from there.
Maybe a pie.
Okay, you prefer pie. Okay.
My leaders are hungry.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that they are truly also hungry to see transformation and development on the continent.
Yeah.
And it's everyone's responsibility. This has been the Africa Leadership Conversation. My name is Diana. I've been your host, and I've been joined by Richmond and Sylvester. We hope to see you again. Do well to follow our podcast, watch us on YouTube, and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye.